"Sir, this is a donor event, not a soup line." The microphone caught every word. At the front of the ballroom in downtown Denver, a man in a worn army green coat stood beside a white linen table holding a folded paper between two fingers. His beard was gray at the edges. His boots were split near the soles. Around his neck hung a faded wooden token on a shoelace, the kind a shelter gives out when every bed is full. People had stopped eating. The charity director, Preston Vale, smiled like he was doing the room a favor by staying polite. Behind him, projected 10 feet high, was the logo of Bright Harbor Foundation and a photograph of children in winter coats. Under it, in gold letters, were the words, "A Decade of Dignity." Preston reached for the paper in the man's hand. "What is this?" he asked. "A receipt," the man said quietly. A few donors shifted in their chairs. A server froze with a tray of coffee cups. Near the side wall, a local reporter lowered her notepad and watched. Preston unfolded the paper, glanced at it, then laughed once through his nose. $12? The man did not answer. Preston lifted the receipt so the first two tables could see it. "Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. whatever your name is, has interrupted a $6 million capital pledge presentation to show us that he gave $12. A nervous ripple moved through the room. The man's hand stayed open, empty now, as if the paper still weighed something. Preston leaned closer, lowering his voice, but not enough. The microphone carried it anyway. "Do you know how many forms we file for real donors? Do you know what it costs this organization every time someone walks in off Colfax Avenue wanting to feel important?" The room tightened. At table 7, an older woman put down her fork. At the back, a young volunteer with a blue apron clasped both hands together. Nobody seemed sure whether they were witnessing a misunderstanding or a cruelty that had simply become too public to ignore. The man in the worn coat spoke again. "I asked for the receipt because your clerk said every dollar mattered." Preston's smile thinned. Of course she did. That's what we trained them to say. Then he did the thing everyone would remember later. He held the receipt over the centerpiece candle. A small flame caught the bottom corner. Gasps came from 3 different tables. The reporter's pen stopped moving. The volunteer stepped forward, then stopped, when Preston raised one finger without even looking at her. The paper blackened at the edge. The homeless man moved fast enough to surprise them. He pinched the burning corner with his bare fingers, pressed it out, and took the receipt back. For the first time, Preston's expression cracked. Not fear, not yet. Irritation. "You put your hands on me again," Preston said, "and security will remove you before dessert." The man glanced down at the scorched corner of the receipt. A tiny line of numbers was still visible beneath the burn mark. So was the date. So was the name of the charity. Then he folded it once, carefully, as if it was not paper, as if it was the last photograph of someone he loved. Preston faced the donors again, recovering his stage voice. "I apologize. Our city is facing a homelessness crisis, and sadly, some individuals mistake compassion for access." That line landed worse than the insult. A donor in a navy suit lowered his phone, still recording. The reporter's eyes narrowed. The volunteer's mouth trembled. But Preston kept going. "This man has been asked twice this week not to loiter near our building. Tonight, he came here to disrupt a lawful private event. If he refuses to leave, we will pursue a trespass complaint." The man in the coat stood under the chandelier, surrounded by polished shoes and crystal glasses, holding the damaged receipt like it could cut through the whole room. Then he said one sentence. "You should check the receipt number before you call security." Preston blinked. It was quick, almost nothing. But the people closest to the stage saw it. His hand tightened around the microphone. At the side entrance, 2 security guards appeared. Behind them stood Maribel Ortiz, Bright Harbor's longtime intake clerk, her face drained of color. She had seen the receipt, too. More importantly, she had recognized the handwriting on it. Preston noticed her, his tone sharpened. "Maribel, go back to the lobby." She did not move. The man in the worn coat slipped the receipt into the inside pocket of his jacket. From that pocket, a second corner, Preston saw it and took one step off the stage. "What else do you have in there?" The ballroom went still in a different way then. Not polite stillness, not embarrassment. The kind that comes when a room realizes the person with power may not be the one holding the microphone. The man did not raise his voice, enough to know this event was never supposed to happen. By Monday morning, Bright Harbor's accounts would be frozen. By Friday, Preston Vale's name would be on every local news site in Colorado. And before the month ended, that scorched $12 receipt would expose a theft that had been hiding in plain sight for years. But none of that began in the ballroom. It began 3 weeks earlier, on a cold morning outside a shelter kitchen, when the same man stood in line for oatmeal and let the city believe he had nothing left to give. 3 weeks earlier, the man in the worn coat stood outside the Haven Street shelter kitchen before sunrise, halfway down a line of people waiting for oatmeal. Denver had turned sharp overnight. Wind moved through the alley behind the old brick building and found every loose thread in his clothes. The shelter door opened at 6, but people came early because the first 30 got hot coffee and the last 20 got whatever was left. His name was Samuel Reed. Most people called him Sam, if they called him anything at all. To the staff, he was the quiet older man who swept the sidewalk after breakfast without being asked. To the police officer who passed the block every morning, he was harmless. To the business owners on Colfax Avenue, he was another body under a coat. Sam kept a faded wooden shelter token tied around his neck with a shoelace. It had a number burned into one side and a tiny harbor stamped into the other. Years earlier, when Bright Harbor Foundation still ran emergency winter beds, a token like that meant a person had a mattress waiting after sundown. To Sam, it meant something else. It had belonged to his wife, Eleanor. She had carried it in her coat pocket during the last winter of her life, back when Bright Harbor was still small enough that staff knew people by name, and nobody called donors partners unless they actually showed up to help. Eleanor had believed in that place. She had mailed them $10 at Christmas even when their own refrigerator was mostly condiments and eggs. After she died, Sam had kept the token because grief needs something small enough to hold. He was not homeless in the way people assumed. He had a room in a weekly motel off Federal Boulevard, paid through the end of the month. The place smelled like bleach and old carpet, and the heater made a ticking sound all night, but the door locked. That mattered. Privacy mattered. Especially for a man carrying a name no one on that block would connect to his face. Samuel Reed was one of 3 trustees of the Eleanor Reed Family Trust, a quiet Denver foundation created from his late wife's inheritance and his own years of work as a municipal auditor. The trust did not put his face on plaques. It did not sponsor galas. For 12 years, it had funded food pantries, youth shelters, medical rides, and rent relief through grants routed by a law office and signed by the trust's administrator. Bright Harbor had been one of those grantees. Sam had approved the first grant himself. Then the reports changed. Not all at once. That was never how theft introduced itself. It arrived as rounded numbers, missing signatures, program names that sounded familiar but did not match older records. It arrived as beautiful photographs attached to thin explanations. It arrived as a director named Preston Vale, who knew how to speak about dignity while building a career on being photographed near it. Sam noticed because numbers had a scent to him. For 31 years, he had worked inside city budgets, tracing where public promises went after speeches ended. He knew the difference between a sloppy report and a dishonest one. Sloppy reports forgot details. Dishonest reports remembered only the details that made the story shine. The trust's attorney wanted to pause funding immediately. Sam said no. "If they're stealing," the attorney told him, "we can document it from here." "Maybe," Sam said, "but I want to see who gets hurt when the money disappears." So he put on the coat he wore for yard work, let his beard grow out, moved into the motel under a shortened name, and started showing up where Bright Harbor claimed its money went. He stood in breakfast lines. He waited outside intake offices. He listened while mothers were told vouchers had run out, while veterans were handed referral cards to phone numbers that rang forever, while teenagers learned that full meant nobody was paid to make room. Every night, he wrote in a cheap spiral notebook with a black pen from the motel lobby. Dates, names, promises, denials. He did not need to pretend to be poor as much as people imagined. Grief had already taught him how to become invisible. On the morning that changed everything, Sam was wiping spilled coffee from a folding table when Maribel Ortiz came through the side door with a clipboard pressed to her chest. Maribel had worked for Bright Harbor longer than Preston had owned a tailored suit. She was in her late 50s with silver in her braid and the tired patience of someone who had learned to be kind in a system that punished softness. She recognized the token at Sam's neck. "Where did you get that?" she asked. Sam covered it with his palm. "Old friend. They stopped using those 8 years ago." "I know." Maribel studied him a little longer, then forced herself back to the clipboard. "If you need intake, you have to come to the main office before noon. After Friday, we won't be doing emergency meal cards here anymore." "Why Friday?" Her jaw tightened. "Budget realignment." Sam had heard that phrase in boardrooms right before real people lost real help. Across the room, a young mother asked if the winter bed list was opening early because of the freeze. Maribel's answer was gentle, but it still landed hard. "No list this week, honey. They told us to wait until after the donor night." Donor night. Sam dried his hands slowly. Bright Harbor's donor event was scheduled for the following Thursday at the Beaumont Hotel, a restored building downtown where chandeliers hung over rooms named after mountain passes. The trust had received an invitation printed on heavy cream paper. Preston Vale had added a handwritten note to the bottom. "Your continued confidence has built this decade of dignity." Sam had read that sentence 5 times. The grant renewal vote was due the next morning. If the trust signed, Bright Harbor would receive another $2 million before the end of the quarter. If Sam challenged the report without proof that could survive lawyers and public relations, Preston could call it a misunderstanding, blame staff, and keep the machine clean enough to run. Sam needed something small, something ordinary, something no one could explain away. So, before leaving the shelter kitchen, he walked to the donation box near the front desk. It was clear plastic scratched at the corners with a sticker that said, "Every dollar matters." Sam took $12 from his pocket. 2 5s, 2 1s. Money he had set aside for laundry. Maribel watched him slide it through the slot. "Sir, you don't have to do that." "I want a receipt," Sam said. She hesitated. "For $12? If every dollar matters." Maribel opened a drawer, pulled out a narrow receipt pad and wrote carefully. Bright Harbor Foundation, $12. Cash, date, receipt number. When she tore it free, her thumb covered the number for half a second. Then she saw it. Sam saw her see it. The number was not random. It belonged to the same sequence Bright Harbor had reported for donor-restricted winter bed funds the year before. The same sequence Sam had flagged in a report that claimed thousands of small cash donations had been collected during months when the lobby donation box had supposedly been locked away for security upgrades. Maribel's hand trembled. Sam folded the receipt and slipped it into his coat. Outside, the wind came hard down Colfax, but he barely felt it. A deadline had turned into a door, and for the first time since Eleanor died, the little wooden token against his chest did not feel like a memory. It felt like a promise. Bright Harbor's main office sat 8 blocks from the shelter kitchen in a renovated warehouse with black-framed windows and a mural of open hands painted across the brick. Inside, everything was warmer than the street. There were framed awards in the lobby, glass jars filled with branded pens, and a wall of donor photographs arranged so carefully it felt less like gratitude than proof of status. Preston Vale's portrait was centered above the reception desk. He wore a navy suit, one hand resting on the shoulder of a smiling child in a winter coat. The caption under it read, "Preston Vale, Executive Director, Restoring Dignity Since 2016. Sam read it twice while waiting in a plastic chair near a fake plant. He had spent his life around public servants and private charities, and he knew the difference between a leader and a man performing leadership. A leader noticed who cleaned the room after the speech. Preston noticed where the camera stood. At 10 minutes past noon, Preston walked through the lobby with a phone pressed to his ear and a leather folio under one arm. He was in his early 40s, handsome in a controlled way, with expensive glasses and the smooth confidence of someone used to being introduced before he entered. "No, the Beaumont setup must be tight," Preston said into the phone. "We need the pledge wall visible when Channel 9 gets there, and move the smaller donors behind the east columns. I don't want empty chairs in the wide shot." Maribel sat behind the front desk, typing with stiff fingers. Sam watched her watch him. She had not forgotten the receipt. She had also not spoken of it. Fear had a way of making good people very quiet. A woman in a camel coat emerged from the hallway. Denise Harper, the City Youth Board representative, had the clipped pace of someone late for 3 places at once. Sam recognized her from public hearings. She had a reputation for asking boring questions that later turned into important ones. Preston brightened when he saw her. Denise. Perfect timing. Harper's expression stayed neutral. "I need the winter bed readiness numbers by Friday. The city cannot recommend support if the emergency capacity is still vague." "Already handled," Preston said. Maribel's fingers paused over the keyboard. Harper noticed. Preston noticed Harper noticing. "It's just an internal formatting issue," he added smoothly. "Maribel is old school. She likes paper trails thick enough to trip over." A few staff members laughed because he was the man who signed their paychecks. Maribel smiled without showing teeth. Sam lowered his eyes before Preston could catch him watching. In the lobby mirror, he saw what Preston would see. An older man in a stained coat, hair too long, boots drying salt marks onto polished concrete. A person easy to move along. That was the rule Preston weaponized most. Access belonged to people who looked useful. If you arrived with a check, you got coffee in a ceramic mug. If you arrived hungry, you got forms. If you smelled like cold weather and public transit, you got told to wait outside even when there were empty chairs. A young volunteer named Tessa came from the back carrying a box of children's gloves. She was 22, maybe 23, with a blue Bright Harbor apron and a college sweatshirt under it. "Mr. Vale," she said, "the North Pantry list is short again. We had 6 families come back yesterday." Preston's face did not change, but the air around him did. "Tessa, Donor Event Week is not the time to improvise program panic. I'm not trying to panic. I just think if we're saying the pantry served 900 families this quarter, but the shelves are—" "Tessa, one word. Quiet enough to sound professional, hard enough to stop her." She swallowed. "Yes, sir." Preston turned back to Harper. "New volunteers sometimes confuse distribution timing with shortages." Harper glanced toward the hallway, where several empty metal shelves were visible through an open door. Sam filed that away. Small injustice. Public correction. Staff made responsible for a lie they did not create. When Harper left, Preston moved toward reception. Maribel reached for a stack of intake forms as if paper could protect her. "I heard you issued a cash receipt this morning," he said. Her hands stilled. Sam kept his head bent over an old magazine, though every part of him sharpened. Maribel answered carefully. "A donor asked for one." "A donor?" "Yes." Preston let the word sit in the lobby like something unpleasant. "For how much?" $12. His smile appeared slowly. "We do not create administrative clutter for loose change during campaign week. Our policy says any donor can request a receipt. Our policy says a lot of things. Judgment is why people have supervisors." Tessa, still holding the glove box, stood motionless near the hallway. Preston extended his hand. "Pull the duplicate." Maribel opened a drawer. Her thumb moved along the receipt pad. Sam could see the tiny change in her breathing when she found the carbon copy. She did not hand it over right away. Preston's voice softened, which somehow made it worse. Maribel. She tore out the duplicate and passed it to him. He read the number. For half a second, the polished director vanished. Something raw and annoyed moved across his face, like a man discovering a locked door in his own house. Then the mask returned. "This sequence is retired," he said. Maribel's voice was barely above the heater hum. It was in the active drawer. "Then you used the wrong pad. You told us last month to finish old supplies before ordering more." Preston's gaze cut to her. Tessa lowered the box. Sam knew that look. He had seen it in hearings when contractors realized a clerk remembered the sentence that would undo them. Preston folded the duplicate receipt once and slipped it into his folio. "From now until the event, no cash receipts without my approval," he said. Maribel stared at the drawer. "That isn't our policy. It is today." Sam almost stood then, but standing would only make him the story too early. Preston was still protecting the shape of the fraud. Sam needed to know which door he would use when cornered, so he remained in the chair, invisible by design. Preston finally noticed him. "Can we help you?" Sam lifted his chin. "Waiting for intake." "Intake closed at noon. It's 12:20. "Exactly." Maribel opened her mouth, but Preston's glance pinned it shut. Sam rose slowly. The wooden token swung against his coat, catching the lobby light. Preston's eyes dropped to it, then moved away, uninterested. To him, it was another poor man's trinket. To Maribel, it was not. Her face changed the moment she saw the tiny harbor stamped into the wood. Her hand went to the edge of the desk, and one knuckle whitened. Sam gave her no sign. Not here. Not under cameras. He walked toward the door, and Tessa moved as if to follow him with a referral card. Preston stopped her. "Do not chase people who refuse process." Sam paused with his hand on the glass door. "If that man comes back asking questions, call security. We cannot let street confusion contaminate donor confidence." Street confusion. Sam opened the door and stepped into the cold. He had the original receipt in his inside pocket. Preston had the duplicate. Maribel had fear. Tessa had seen too much to forget. Denise Harper had noticed the empty shelves, and Bright Harbor had 7 days before $2 million renewed automatically. Sam could walk away, send a formal letter, and let lawyers trade polite accusations for 6 months. But by then, the winter beds would still be closed, the pantry shelves would still be empty, and Preston Vale would stand under a chandelier calling it dignity. So Sam went back to the motel, took Eleanor's token from around his neck and laid it beside the receipt. Then he opened his notebook to a clean page and wrote one line at the top. "Donor night is the room where he feels safest." The next morning, Sam returned to Bright Harbor before the doors opened. He did not go to the lobby. He waited across the street beside a closed nail salon, watching staff arrive one by one through the side entrance. Tessa came first with 2 tote bags of groceries that did not come from any foundation account. Maribel came 10 minutes later, shoulders bent against the wind, one hand holding a travel mug and the other gripping her keys too tightly. Preston arrived last. A black SUV dropped him at the curb. He wore a charcoal overcoat and no hat, as if weather was something that happened to other people. Before entering, he paused beneath the mural of open hands and checked his reflection in the glass. Sam wrote the time in his notebook. By noon, the first dismissal came exactly as expected. A printed notice appeared on the office door. "Due to campaign week operations, public intake will be by appointment only." Under it, in smaller type, was the number for a voicemail box that Sam already knew was full. A father with a toddler read the notice twice and knocked anyway. Nobody answered. The toddler pressed one mitten against the glass and peered into the warm lobby. Tessa saw them from inside. Her face tightened. She started toward the door with a small bag of snacks, but Preston came from the hallway and said something Sam could not hear. Tessa stopped. The father lifted the child onto his hip and walked away. Sam did not follow. He wrote the time, the notice, and Tessa's reaction. Then he went to the public library on West Colfax, asked for a computer, and opened the state charity filing database. He had done this kind of work before. Not quickly, not dramatically, patiently. Numbers are not confessions, but they do tell you where to knock. Bright Harbor's most recent filing claimed a sharp increase in winter emergency pass-through support. It also claimed donor-restricted cash contributions that rose in a neat staircase over 3 years. Too neat. Real small dollar giving came in jagged lines, not polished steps. Sam printed only one page. The old receipt sequence appeared in the public filing as part of a batch total. The exact range included Maribel's $12 receipt from that morning, even though Preston had called the pad retired. That would be the supporting factual proof, if Sam could get it in front of the right eyes. But the emotional proof had to be something deeper. A number could expose Preston. It could not explain what he had stolen from people. That evening, Sam found Maribel behind the shelter kitchen breaking down cardboard boxes in the alley. She saw him and nearly dropped the utility knife. "I can't talk to you," she said. "I know. Then don't make me. I won't." He took one step no closer, keeping space between them. "I only need to ask if Eleanor Reed meant anything to you." Maribel's face changed so sharply he regretted the question. "She used to come in on Thursdays," Maribel said after a long silence. "She brought socks and grocery bags, never wanted her picture taken." Sam's throat tightened, but he kept his voice steady. She believed this place could stay honest. Maribel wiped one eye with the back of her wrist, angry at herself for doing it. It was honest, before him. "What happened?" She shook her head. "I have a job because my sister's medical bills ate my savings. I have a lease. I have no hero money. I'm not asking you to be a hero. Everyone says that right before they ask." Sam reached into his coat and took out the invitation to the donor night. Heavy cream paper, Preston's note at the bottom. Maribel stared at it. "You're invited. Someone I represent is." Her eyes moved from the invitation to the wooden token now resting against his sweater. "Who are you?" A man trying not to waste his last chance. That was not the answer she wanted, but it was true enough to stand on. Maribel pressed a flattened box against the dumpster and lowered her voice. "Preston's making staff sign a statement tomorrow. It says we all confirm the winter bed funds were properly distributed. He said outside auditors might ask questions after donor night. Will you sign? If I don't, I'm suspended pending review." The practical threat had arrived. Sam felt the cold settle between his ribs. Preston was not only hiding numbers now. He was preparing people to carry them for him. "Don't sign anything false," Sam said. Maribel gave a tired laugh. "That's easy to say when you're not the one who has to pay rent." He had no clean answer for that. A delivery truck rattled past the alley mouth. Maribel flinched, then shoved the last cardboard into the bin. Before leaving, she whispered, "There's a box in the basement. Old donor correspondence. They were supposed to scan it years ago. He told me to shred anything from before his tenure after the event." Sam went still. "Why after?" "Because the Beaumont display uses legacy donors. He wants the story, not the records." "What's in the box?" "I don't know. Letters, thank you notes, maybe photos." She glanced toward the street. "Your wife's name might be in there. I remember her handwriting." Then she left through the back door before fear could change her mind. Sam stood in the alley with Eleanor's token under his palm. The moral choice came down to one ugly question. Protect Maribel by staying quiet, or push forward and risk making her the first casualty. By the next afternoon, Preston forced the issue. Sam was in the lobby again, seated under the donor wall, when staff gathered near the conference room. Preston passed out single-page statements on foundation letterhead. Tessa held hers like it was wet paint. Maribel read the first paragraph and went gray. Preston saw Sam watching. "Mr. Reed," he said, reading the name from an intake sticker Maribel must have entered. "You seem to enjoy our furniture." Sam folded his hands. "It's warmer than the sidewalk. This office is not a warming center." "No." and yet you keep returning. I was told to make an appointment." Preston smiled for the staff. "Then you should know appointments are for clients willing to participate in process, not men who wander in with stories, receipts, and old tokens." There it was, more personal now. He had noticed the token. Tessa's eyes flicked to Sam's chest. Maribel's jaw clenched. Preston came closer, lowering his voice for Sam but keeping enough volume for witnesses. "People like you hear the word charity and think it means no boundaries. We have children, donors, elected officials, and serious families coming through here. I will not have them harassed by someone staging poverty for attention." Staging poverty. Sam almost laughed, because that accusation had brushed too close to truth and still missed the point entirely. Preston mistook his silence for weakness. He took the wooden token between two fingers and lifted it from Sam's sweater. "Is this part of the performance?" Sam's hand closed around Preston's wrist. Not hard. Enough. The lobby stopped breathing. Preston's eyes flashed. "Take your hand off me." Sam released him. The token fell back against his chest. "Don't touch that again," Sam said. Preston adjusted his cuff, embarrassed by how quickly his control had slipped. "You're done here. If you appear at the Beaumont, I will have you removed before you reach the lobby." Sam stood. Tessa took a small step forward, then stopped herself. Maribel's statement remained unsigned in her hand. Sam walked to the front desk and asked for a pen. Maribel gave him one. On the back of a blank intake form, he wrote an address and a time. He slid it back to her. "Give this to Denise Harper if you decide not to sign." Preston snatched the form before Maribel could touch it. "What is this?" "A way out," Sam said. Preston glanced at the address, then crumpled the paper. "No. It's another nuisance." He dropped it into the trash beside the desk. Sam did not move. Because, while Preston watched his face, Tessa quietly reached down, pulled the paper out, and tucked it under the glove box. Sam saw it. So did Maribel. Preston did not. That night, Sam prepared the proof. At the motel desk under the yellow lamp, he placed 3 things in a neat line: Eleanor's wooden token, the $12 receipt, and the single printed filing page from the library. Then he opened the envelope Maribel had left at the shelter office after closing. Inside was one old letter on pale stationery. Eleanor's handwriting filled the page. Her car as a child and never forgot what a locked door could mean. Sam read the final line 3 times. "Please use this gift for winter beds, and please do not ever let the person needing help feel small for asking." Sam sat very still. The theft had a shape now, not just missing money, a broken promise in his wife's own hand. He folded the letter, placed it behind the receipt, and put both inside the cream invitation. Then he wrote Denise Harper's name on the outside. He would not run. Preston Vale had built a room where image mattered more than truth. So Sam would bring the truth into that room, dressed exactly like the person Preston had trained everyone to ignore. By the time Sam entered the Beaumont ballroom, Preston Vale was already winning. The donor event had been built like a stage set for compassion. White flowers, gold programs, a pledge wall near the front, photographs of children in coats projected over a room full of polished shoes and careful smiles. Sam came through the side entrance in the same worn coat, the wooden token under his collar, and the cream invitation folded inside his pocket. At first, nobody knew what to do with him. A hotel worker asked if he was looking for the service hallway. Sam showed the invitation. The worker read it again, then waved over a Bright Harbor staffer with a headset. That staffer whispered into the headset. Across the ballroom, Preston's smile held for the donors in front of him, but his eyes shifted. He saw Sam. Then he saw the invitation. For one brief second, all the noise in the room seemed to move around that fact. Sam walked to the check-in table. "Samuel Reed," he said. The volunteer searched the list, found the name, and hesitated. "You're seated at table 12. Preston reached the table before Sam could take the place card. "There's been an error," he said. The volunteer froze. Sam kept his voice even. "My name is on your list." Preston leaned close, pleasant for anyone watching from a distance. "You are not using a stolen invitation to embarrass this organization. It was mailed to me. To someone you are pretending to be." Sam felt the first circle of witnesses forming. 2 donors nearby stopped talking. Tessa stood by the coat check with a tray of name badges, her face tight. Maribel was near the hallway holding a stack of programs like a shield. Preston took the place card from the table and slipped it into his pocket. "Table 12 is full. It has 3 empty seats. Reserved." Sam could have opened the envelope then. He could have ended the performance before Preston had a chance to draw blood. But Denise Harper had not arrived yet, and Sam needed the room, not the hallway. So he stepped aside and waited. Preston mistook patience for defeat. For the next hour, Sam stood along the wall while Bright Harbor celebrated itself. A video played. Donors clapped at the right moments. Preston spoke about winter beds, pantry access, and radical dignity, his voice warm enough to sell the lie to anyone who wanted to buy it. Every sentence cost Sam something. On the screen, a black-and-white photograph appeared of volunteers from Bright Harbor's early years. Sam's breath caught. Eleanor was in the second row. She wore an old wool coat and held a cardboard box of socks in both arms. Her hair was pinned badly, the way it always fell loose by noon. The caption beneath the photo said, "Community Supporters 2011. No name, no mention of her gift, no trace of the woman whose trust had kept half their programs alive." Sam's hand went to the token under his collar. A chair scraped nearby. A donor whispered, "Is he supposed to be here?" Preston heard it from the stage. He smiled into the microphone. "We open our doors to many people in crisis," he said, "and sometimes those lines blur on nights like this." Several heads angled toward Sam. Tessa's eyes filled with anger. Maribel lowered the programs until they bent in her hands. Preston continued. But dignity also means maintaining boundaries, especially when vulnerable individuals are confused by formal settings. The humiliation shifted from private to public. Sam stayed where he was. Then Preston announced the pledge presentation. A large number appeared on the screen, the one he wanted photographed and shared by morning. $6 million in projected support. $2 million of it depended on the Reed Trust renewal. Sam moved toward the front. Maribel saw him and whispered, "Please be careful." He nodded once. Preston paused mid-sentence as Sam approached the white linen table at the edge of the stage and pulled the $12 receipt from his coat. What followed was the moment the room would replay later. Preston's insult about the donor event, his laughter at the amount, his decision to hold the receipt over the centerpiece candle, and Sam pinching out the flame before the whole proof burned away. But the humiliation did not end there. Preston signaled security. 2 guards moved through the aisle. Phones came out now, not openly at first, but enough. The local reporter, Claire Benson from Channel 9, had been sitting near the back with her notebook closed. Now it was open. Preston addressed the room with a practiced sadness. "This gentleman has been harassing our staff all week. He has refused services, disrupted intake, and attempted to misuse another donor's invitation. I am sorry you have to see how complicated our work can be." Sam held the scorched receipt between 2 fingers. "It was my invitation." Preston laughed softly. "Your invitation?" "Yes." "To a foundation event?" "Yes. In your name." Sam did not answer fast enough for him. Preston turned that pause into a weapon. "Then prove it. Tell us the name of the trust listed beside your seat." Sam's fingers tightened around the receipt. The room waited. He could say it. He could remove the disguise with one sentence and watch Preston scramble. But the proof had to land clean. If he revealed himself too soon, Preston would frame the rest as a trustee's vendetta, a private funding dispute, a misunderstanding dressed in theater. So Sam said only, "Read the number." Preston's patience snapped. He reached for the receipt again, but Sam pulled it back. "Security," Preston said. One guard touched Sam's elbow. Tessa stepped forward. Mr. Vale, he's on the list. Preston's head whipped toward her. You are relieved for the evening. Tessa went still. There it was. Job risk made real in front of everyone. Maribel moved next. Preston, don't. He pointed toward the hallway. You two. Both of you can explain tomorrow why you let this situation develop. Maribel's face drained. Sam felt the corner closing. If he pushed now, two women who had already risked enough would pay before the truth could protect them. Preston leaned into the microphone again. I want everyone to notice something. This is why responsible organizations cannot be run by sentiment. A receipt, a sad story, an old token around someone's neck, and suddenly people forget rules. He held out his hand. Give me the receipt. Sam shook his head. Preston's voice dropped. Then I will file the trespass complaint, and I will include the staff members who helped you enter. That landed exactly where he intended. Tessa covered her mouth. Maribel's eyes shone, but she did not cry. The two guards tightened their hold. Sam felt something in him bend. Not break, bend. Eleanor's letter was in the cream envelope against his chest, her handwriting, her final request. Please do not ever let the person needing help feel small for asking. He had turned shame into policy. Sam removed the envelope from his coat. Preston saw the heavy paper and moved quickly. Take that from him. No, Sam said. One word. Quiet. Clear. The guard hesitated, perhaps because Sam did not sound confused anymore. At that moment, the ballroom doors opened. Denise Harper entered with her coat still on and a man beside her carrying a slim black folder. She had Tessa's crumpled note in one hand. Preston's smile disappeared too late to hide. Harper's voice cut across the room. Mr. Vale, before anyone is removed, I want that receipt read aloud. Preston recovered quickly because men like him practice recovery. He smiled at Denise Harper as if she had arrived early to a scheduled meeting instead of late to a public unraveling. Denise, he said, this is a private donor event. I'm happy to brief you Monday. Harper did not take off her coat. Read the receipt. The man beside her opened the slim black folder and stood quietly at her right shoulder. He was not introduced, and somehow that made Preston more careful. Preston lifted both hands, inviting the room to see how reasonable he was being. This individual has been disruptive all week. The paper he's holding is a $12 receipt issued improperly by staff using an outdated pad. Then, reading it should take 10 seconds, Harper said. A few people murmured. Preston's eyes moved to Claire Benson from Channel 9, then to the donor with the phone still recording, then to the pledge wall glowing behind him. He could refuse, but refusal had begun to look like fear. Fine, he said. Sam held out the scorched receipt. Preston reached for it. Sam did not let go. No, Sam said. Maribel reads it. Preston's face hardened. Absolutely not. Harper spoke before he could continue. Ms. Ortiz has custody of intake records. Let her read it. Maribel stood near the hallway, pale but upright. For a second, fear and duty fought across her face. Then she walked forward. The room made space for her. Sam placed the receipt in her hand. Maribel held it under the chandelier light. The bottom corner was burned black, but the ink remained. Her voice shook on the first words, then steadied as the room listened. Bright Harbor Foundation. Cash donation. $12. Received from Samuel Reed. Date, January 17th. Receipt number W-18473. Preston gave a short dismissive laugh. There. A clerical error with an old receipt book. Embarrassing, yes. Criminal, no. Sam watched the room. Some donors wanted that answer. It would let them return to dessert, to pledges, to the comfort of believing a cruel moment had no larger meaning. Then Tessa spoke from beside the coat check. That number wasn't from an old book. Preston's head snapped toward her. Tessa, you are not part of this conversation. She flinched, but Claire Benson's pen was moving now, and Harper was watching her with full attention. Tessa swallowed. Last month, you told us to use old supplies before ordering new ones. Maribel said it in the lobby and you corrected her. I heard it. A chair creaked near the front. Preston pointed at her. A confused volunteer is not evidence. No, Sam said. She's a witness to a detail you denied. The room understood the first fracture before Preston did. Not the whole fraud, just the shape of a lie told too confidently. Preston tried to regain speed. This is absurd. A receipt sequence means nothing without context. Sam reached into the cream envelope. This time, no guard touched him. He unfolded the old letter with both hands. The paper had softened at the creases. Eleanor's handwriting, round and firm, filled the page from nearly 15 years earlier. Sam did not read the whole thing. He read only what mattered. My wife wrote this to Bright Harbor after sending one of our first winter bed gifts. She wrote, "Please use this gift for winter beds, and please do not ever let the person needing help feel small for asking." The words moved through the ballroom differently than numbers had, not loudly, deeply. Maribel covered her mouth. Tessa lowered her head. At table 7, the older woman who had put down her fork earlier wiped her glasses with a napkin. Sam held up the wooden token from around his neck. This was Eleanor's. Bright Harbor gave it to her after she spent one winter here as a young woman, long before she had anything to donate. She believed a receipt was not about the amount. It was a promise that someone's gift had a destination. Preston's lips parted, but no polished sentence came. Sam placed the letter on the white linen table beside the scorched receipt. "This receipt is that same promise," he said, "and its number is the reason I came." Preston found his voice. "Your grief does not turn a $12 donation into an audit." "No," Sam said, "your filing does." From the envelope, he took the single printed page from the state charity database. No stack of documents, no dramatic boxes. Just one public record, clean enough for anyone in the room to follow. He handed it to Harper. She read silently, then passed it to the man with the black folder. He scanned it once and nodded. Harper faced the room. "This filing reports donor-restricted winterbed cash contributions in a receipt sequence that includes W18473. Preston spoke over her. "That is a batch range." "Yes," Harper said. "A batch range reported for last year." A low sound moved through the tables. Maribel stared at the receipt in her hand. "But I wrote W-184733 3 days ago." Sam let that sit. The room caught up in pieces. If the same receipt number had already been reported as part of last year's winter bed donations, then Bright Harbor had either reused records, fabricated batches, or counted money that did not exist. Any answer was bad. None belonged under a banner that said dignity. Preston stepped away from the microphone, then remembered the microphone was still on. "That printout is being misinterpreted," he said. "Restricted gifts are reconciled across fiscal periods. Staff enter placeholders. It's accounting language. You people don't understand nonprofit finance." "You people?" Claire Benson repeated from the back, loud enough. Preston froze. Sam picked up the microphone from the stand. He did not raise it like a weapon. He held it low, close enough for his voice to carry. "I understand finance," he said. "I audited municipal grants for 31 years. Preston's eyes narrowed. Sam continued. "I also understand why you didn't know that. You never asked who I was until you thought I was someone you could remove." The old woman at table 7 whispered, "Lord." Preston stared at him now as if trying to rebuild the man from the coat outward. Sam reached into the envelope one last time and removed the place card Preston had taken from the check-in table. Tessa had retrieved it after Preston slipped it into his pocket and later passed it to Harper with the crumpled note. Harper held it up. "Samuel Reed, Eleanor Reed Family Trust, Table 12. The donor event did not explode. It tightened. The people in that room understood before Preston could decide which lie to use next. The man he had mocked was not a trespasser. He was not confused. He was tied to the trust whose renewal had been quietly placed inside Preston's $6 million pledge number. Preston pointed at Sam. "This is entrapment." "No," Sam said. He set Eleanor's letter, the receipt, and the filing page in a straight line on the table. Then he said the line that ended Preston's control of the room. "You stole from the beds and called the cold a budget problem." Nobody clapped. It was better than clapping. Donors began pushing back chairs. Claire Benson was speaking quietly into her phone. The donor in the navy suit sent the recording to someone before Preston could ask him to stop. Maribel finally placed her unsigned staff statement on the table and slid it toward Harper. "I won't sign this," she said. Tessa came forward and laid her copy beside it. Preston's panic showed fully then. He grabbed for the microphone. "This event is over. Security, clear the room." The guards did not move. Harper stepped between Preston and the table. "No one clears anything. Bright Harbor receives city-linked youth funds. I am requesting preservation of records tonight." The man with the black folder finally spoke. "I'm Michael Tran, outside counsel for the Youth Board. Mr. Vale, do not remove, shred, alter, or delete Foundation records. We'll send formal notice within the hour." Preston laughed, but it broke halfway through. "You have no authority over our private donors." Sam answered calmly. "The Reed Trust does." He took another paper from inside his coat, not as proof of theft, but as action. A signed suspension notice for the renewal, prepared by the trust attorney and waiting for this exact condition. "The $2 million renewal is frozen pending independent review," Sam said. "No payment will be released while winterbed funds are in question." That consequence landed harder than the accusation. Preston's entire body seemed to draw inward. The pledge wall behind him still showed $6 million, but the number had become a ghost. Donors were reading the room now, not the screen. Harper picked up the receipt with care and slipped it into a clear sleeve from Tran's folder. "This stays preserved." Maribel handed over Preston's duplicate receipt copy from her bag. "He took this from my drawer." She did not answer to the fear in his voice anymore. Sam removed Eleanor's token from his neck and laid it beside the letter. For the first time all night, his hand trembled. "This foundation was built to keep people from feeling invisible," he said. "Tonight, you showed everyone who you make invisible first." Preston had no reply. There were still procedures ahead: lawyers, auditors, board meetings. No one was marched out in handcuffs under the chandelier, because real justice did not move that cleanly. But the first consequence began in that room. Harper instructed Tran to notify the city. The board chair, reached by phone near the dessert table, ordered an emergency review before the week ended. The largest private sponsor suspended its pledge before midnight. Bright Harbor's finance office was locked pending record preservation, and Preston Vale, who had opened the night as the voice of dignity, stood alone beside a burned $12 receipt, while the people he had humiliated became the only ones anyone trusted. The first morning after the donor event, Bright Harbor's front doors stayed locked until 9. By then, the sidewalk was already full. Not with cameras only, though cameras came. Not with angry donors only, though several stood there holding folded programs from the night before. The first people in line were the ones who had been told to come back later, call a dead voicemail box, or wait until after donor night. Maribel unlocked the door. For a moment she simply stood there with her keys in her hand. Then she opened it wide. No one cheered. It was too early for that. Trust, once broken, did not return because a lock clicked. But people came in from the cold, and that mattered. By noon, the board had placed Preston Vale on administrative leave pending the emergency review. By the end of the week, outside accountants were inside the finance office, comparing records no one at Bright Harbor was allowed to touch alone. The city froze its youth funds until the winterbed money could be traced. The Reed Trust held its $2 million and offered to pay for independent legal counsel for staff asked to sign false statements. Maribel took the offer. Tessa did too. They were not rewarded with speeches or instant promotions. They were protected. Their jobs could not be used as weapons while the review continued. Their statements were taken properly, with counsel present, and their names stayed out of the first wave of headlines. Preston resigned before the month ended. His public statement used careful words: distraction, transition, best interests. But Claire Benson's report had already shown enough: the receipt number, the filing page, the old letter. His voice through the microphone telling a man with $12 that compassion did not mean access. Later that spring, state investigators opened a formal inquiry into restricted funds. No one pretended the process would be fast. Missing money had to be traced account by account, year by year. But for the first time in a long time, the question inside Bright Harbor was not how to protect the image. It was how to repair the harm. Sam did not move into a mansion. He did not become the face of a campaign. He returned the motel key at the end of the month and went back to his small house in Lakewood, the one with Eleanor's rose bushes cut low for winter. For several days he did almost nothing. He made coffee. He opened mail. He sat at the kitchen table where Eleanor used to stack grocery coupons beside foundation reports and tell him that numbers without mercy were just another kind of poverty. On the 8th day, Maribel came by with a cardboard box. Inside were records recovered from the Bright Harbor basement before they could be shredded. Old photographs, thank you notes, sign-in sheets from winter nights when the shelter had stayed open past capacity because volunteers refused to send people back into snow. At the bottom was a small envelope with Eleanor's name on it. Inside was a photograph Sam had never seen. Eleanor stood outside Bright Harbor in that same old wool coat holding a tray of paper cups. Around her neck was the wooden token, hanging from a bright red ribbon before time and grief turned it into something quieter. On the back, in Maribel's handwriting, were 4 words. She stayed after closing. Sam traced the words with one finger. For years, he had carried the token like evidence of what he had lost. Now, it became evidence of what Eleanor had built in other people when nobody was taking pictures. Bright Harbor changed slowly, which was the only kind of change Sam trusted. The board created a staff-led intake review and reopened the winter bed program under temporary supervision. Donor-restricted gifts were posted publicly each quarter in plain language. The old mural stayed, but Preston's portrait came down. In its place, the lobby displayed a narrow frame holding a copy of Eleanor's letter. Not the scorched receipt. Sam kept that. The original stayed preserved with the investigation, sealed in a sleeve with its burned corner and stubborn little number. But Maribel made him a copy, and he placed it in a drawer beside Eleanor's token. Every December after that, the Reed Trust funded winter beds directly through verified partners. But Sam added one rule to every grant agreement. Anyone who gave any amount could ask where it went. No minimum. No special table. No polished shoes required. 1 year later, on a cold Thursday evening, Sam stood outside Bright Harbor as people entered for supper. He wore a clean coat this time, plain and dark, with the wooden token tucked inside the pocket instead of around his neck. Maribel was at the front desk, laughing softly with a mother whose little boy kept trying to stamp his own hand. Tessa carried blankets from the storage room, no longer asking permission to solve problems everyone could see. Near the lobby wall, a man Sam did not know placed 3 crumpled dollar bills into the donation box. Then he asked, almost embarrassed, "Can I get a receipt for that?" Maribel smiled. "Of course," she said. "Every dollar matters." Sam stepped outside before anyone could make the moment about him. Snow had started falling over Colfax Avenue, soft enough to disappear when it touched the pavement. He stood beneath the mural of open hands and took Eleanor's token from his pocket. The wood was worn smooth now. The tiny harbor was almost gone. He closed his fingers around it, not from grief this time, but from gratitude. Some justice arrives in headlines. Some arrives in courtrooms. But the kind that lasts begins when a room learns to stop measuring people by what they appear to have left. So let me ask you this. If you had been in that ballroom, would you have spoken up before the receipt was read? Tell me in the comments. And if stories like this remind you that dignity is never a donation, but a duty, Subscribe for the next one.